There is a sinister and secretive group of people that run the globe. They control everything from banks to the media. They own the world. They own 99% of the world's wealth, and yet there are less than 1% of the population. They have special family bloodlines to pass on power from generation to generation. They have sacred rites and secret rituals. They have a belief system that stretches back in time for thousands of years to their very origin. They spawned the religions, royal families, global business, financial systems, and arms companies. They created revolutions and wars on an epic scale. They watch everything we do and manipulate our thoughts and actions. You are in their service, and you do not even realize it. They have been doing all of this and more for thousands of years, and they have one goal in sight. This is the darkest, untold tale of control in the history of mankind. This is the story of what they believe, what they do, how they do it, and why. They have many names, but they have one origin and one purpose. And now we have tracked down their symbols, secrets, names, origin and purpose. Using previously unknown and secret sources, we will reveal them. This is the Illuminati. For centuries there have existed certain esoteric schools of mystical philosophy. They originated in the Orient, moved through the Levant, Egypt and the Near East, until they finally arrived on the shores of Europe, and from there to the rest of the world. Hidden within these schools there are elements of Buddhism, Zoroastrianism and Egyptian occultism, mingled with Grecian mysteries, Jewish Kabbalism and fragments of Syrian cults. Some of these names may sound strange, but they are the origin of our modern religions and belief systems. Out of this hodgepodge of Oriental philosophy, magic and mythology arose the early Christian Gnostics, Islamic Mohammedism, Ishmaelites, Druzes, and the infamous Assassins. The Gnostics were the mystical element of Judaism. They wrote the Gospels of Christianity and hid within the text the real meaning of the strange tales. The same is true of most mystical elements of the various religions. From all of this arose the political religious movements of the Middle Ages. We know them as the Illuminati. but they had other names such as Albigenses, Cathars, Waldenses, Troubadours, Anabaptists, and Lollards. And from here arose the secret societies. The Knights Templar initiated the Muslim assassins into the subversive mysteries, and the occult forces of the alchemists, Rosicrucians, and others permeated them all. This is the real history of what we generally term the Illuminati. Through this understanding, we shall be able to see them clearly wherever they arise. This is the information you need to see clearly. This is the hidden history of the Illuminati that you have never seen before, taken from secret sources that we have tracked down and are now about to reveal. Prepare to witness the might of the world's most powerful secret society. We begin with a sacred secret that is at the very heart of the various societies, the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is a mystical tool of Judaism. It is a sacred way of getting to God and involves rituals, symbols, and things we would classify as magic. The Kabbalah is made up of two kinds, theoretical and practical. Practical Kabbalah is engaged with the construction of talismans and amulets. The theoretical is divided into literal and dogmatic. The dogmatic is the summary of the metaphysical doctrine taught by Kabbalists. It is the system of Jewish philosophy. It is the perception of the plan of the universe itself and the link which attaches all elements to a common principle. It represents the 32 paths on the Kabbalistic tree of life, the 10 Sephiroth, or centres of light, united together by the 22 paths to which the Hebrew letters are attributed. These are potent magical forces. The letters are divided into 3 mother letters, Shin for fire, Mem for water, and Aleph for air. There are 7 double letters for the planets, 12 single letters for the signs of the zodiac. This is how the esoteric magic is broken down. The power is not just within the knowledge, but with the words and letters themselves. The knowledge of how to utilize these is the power of the secret societies. Uniting all of these devices is the spirit or ether, what they call in Star Wars the Force. It is all about the descent of the soul of man into matter, and its ultimate return from matter back to the universal life force. This return is called illumination or enlightenment. Knowledge of this is thousands of years old, and yet science is discovering that energy cannot die, and hence our energy does in fact return back into the universal energy from where we came. The secret knowledge is that we never left. We just unite as a soul or force with matter itself and become conscious of our own existence. It is the ultimate knowledge that the God on earth, the universe itself, has become aware of itself. Imagine this knowledge in ancient times and how it would raise you up above others. The term we use, God, is not the only one they use. The secret term is known as the Tetramagraton, Yod He Vav He. It is the creative principle, the thing that gave rise to all others. It is the Father, Mother, Son and Daughter. It is all. It represents all forces of nature. There is no division. In the beginning, it divided, male and female, and the ultimate truth is that reunion is the divine force. This is the reason that sexual rituals across the world from ancient times were seen as sacred. It was the work of the creative principle. The absolute Godhead is called the Whitehead, for within white are all the colours of the spectrum. He is the source of all light and wisdom. Knowledge of Him makes one like Him. He is known also as the Ancient of Days, for all that exists, all that has been formed by the Ancient of Days, can only exist through the union of the male and female. The spreading of this male and female, this father and mother, throughout the universe results in the Son, for within Him is the Father and Mother. This is the origin of the Son on earth, the Christ child, for He is the Ancient of Days reunited. Today, secret societies see this Son as knowledge and science. Within Him, all that can be known exists. Knowledge of Him within one's own mind allows knowledge of all that is. This knowledge can be gained in several ways. Meditation, prayer, isolation and drugs are just a few examples. It is all about freeing the mind from the material, freeing the soul from matter. It is no different to the experiences we hear about from people who have taken mind-expanding drugs. It allows creativity to flow. It sparks the creative principle that is within each one of us. We came from the universe, we are the universe, and within us all there exists the universe. We can therefore create whatever we want, as long as we have the knowledge to do so. In sacred symbolism, we see these principles laid out before us. Often, it is the all-seeing eye, the symbol of wisdom, the one, unified Godhead. Often, it is a human with three heads, the Father, Mother and Son. They are divided and yet together. Kabbalists state that the mind is like this, and that it is united by means of 32 pairs of nerves which mirror the 32 paths of wisdom. Wisdom, therefore, is the path to the white head. Through the work of the caduceus or kundalini, wisdom can be attained. These are simply symbolic representations of the energy force rising up to the white head, the source of all light. According to the Kabbalah, every form of existence from matter to the eternal wisdom is the manifestation of this infinite power. It is not sufficient that all things should come from God in order to have reality and continuance. It is also necessary that God should always be present in them, that he should live, develop, and eternally reproduce to infinity under these forms. It is the ultimate fractal. The true secret of all this is that none of these secret societies therefore truly believes in one God. They are pantheistic, for there are many elements of the one God in existence, in order for there to be an existence. God truly is within all. The Kabbalah is not a medieval creation as some would have it. In fact, it goes back in time to ancient Chaldea and Persian, and can be traced to the period of Jewish captivity in Babylon. The Jewish scholars there adopted and adapted much older philosophies, and by doing so created a seed that would find its home in Europe centuries later. At the very same time, Zoroaster was teaching his doctrine of similar dualism, the light and dark, the fire and water, good and evil. The Jews took on these beliefs and 14 years later returned from captivity. In later times, the alchemists and astrologers of the Middle Ages used these beliefs in their own work on the transmuting of metals and conjurations. This was known as fluidic magic, before science came along and redefined everything. It was based firmly in the Kabbalah, which itself was based on older ancient cults. Today these beliefs are still profoundly at the heart of secret societies. One group of Jews that would influence the world and the secret societies were the Gnostics. They derived their leading doctrines and ideas from many sources, including Plato, Philo, the Zend-Avesta, the Kabbalah, and the sacred books of India and Egypt. It is these mystics of Judaism that introduced them into what became known as Christianity. They wrote the various texts that we would now call the New Testament, and many more besides. Within these texts they hid the mysteries. This is why today we can look back and see that the stories of Jesus and Mary mirror those of Horus and Isis in Egypt and many other places and stories. These Gnostics brought together for the first time the mysteries of the world and gave them a double meaning, a practical and a theosophical. The stories can be read on many levels because there are many levels. These are not the works of a few Jewish scribes living in Damascus, but rather the accumulation of thousands of men over thousands of years. There is deep, hidden truth about the mysteries of the universe to be found within those pages. The great meeting of ancient mystics occurred in that lost city of Alexandria. Here the Jewish-Greek school under Aristobulus and Philo merged with Asia, Egypt, Greece and more. All the wonders of the universe as perceived by the minds of men came together in this one place and time. Aristobulus truthfully declared that all the facts and details of the Jewish scriptures were in fact allegories concealing the most profound meanings, and that Plato was in fact simply borrowing from what had come before. Studying Plato is therefore to study the many that came before. The truth is, this can be said of a great many so-called classical writings. From Egypt, Greece, Persia and elsewhere, the Platonists borrowed, and the Gnostics received and spread. For the ordinary man on the street, as it is to this day, all of this seems fanciful and beyond them. It was secret and sacred, and for the scholars alone. And yet, even today, our modern secret societies still hold to the belief that everything that exists emanates from a source of infinite light. They claim direct descent from the Jews of Alexandria, and by them back in time over millennia to the masters of the mysteries. They are known by a name that would change into Illuminati. They were known as the Brotherhood of Light. They preserved the learning throughout the Dark Ages, so called because of the loss of the light of learning. The highest development was in the Egyptian and Kabbalistic systems, and this was blended with Christian thought through the Gnostics and Neoplatonists. Its studies kept alive during the Dark Ages among the secret Jewish cabals, and it is still alive and hidden to this day among the modern Brothers of Light the Illuminati. In Egypt and Judea, long before the commencement of Christianity, these notions were spread. They formed Christianity through the many Gnostic groups known as the Essene, Therapeutes, Sadducees, Carpocratians, Basilidians, and Manichaeans. They all adopted the teachings and spread them into Asia, Africa, and Europe. They preserved the mysteries of the Temple of Solomon as a device for teaching about the truths of human existence and the grand architect. These teachings are fully found within the secrets of the later Freemasons. The reason is simple. It is a long, single thread of secret societies that formed from the earliest of times. Knowledge passed on from one generation to the next, hidden in allegory and symbolism, and being rediscovered today through science. The early Gnostics and Manichaeans were known as primitive Masonry, and their teachings preserved among the Druses, who came into contact with the Crusaders in later years and influenced them. This is the line of creation for the modern Freemasons, directly back to the Gnostics, and from there back to Egypt, Persia, and the ancient cults. It can all seem confusing. Trinities, dualism, one God, pantheism. But in truth, they all relate. We can see this through the teachings of the Manichaeans. They taught pantheism and dualism, many gods of the one, and the division of that one God to ultimately reunite. The creative principle must have dark and light, male and female, in order to create. But the ultimate union brings about the creation of what was there in the beginning, the one God, the sun, the light. It is the symbol of the serpent eating its own tail, the coming full circle. One simple symbol depicting the ultimate truth. What we begin to see with the Manichaeans is a glimmer of so-called modern philosophy of communism, something that is part and parcel of true Masonry, for the good of all. Nature, they said, reveals the two great principles, community and unity of all things. Human laws were contrary to the natural laws, and were therefore guilty violations of the divine order of things. It was therefore necessary to institute community of lands and goods. Manes, the founder of the cult, disavowed war and human civil establishments as being created by the dark side. Possessions were condemned. For his beliefs, Manes paid the ultimate price of crucifixion, his message too radical for a greedy humanity. In later years, these beliefs found a home in the Ishmaelis, named after their founder, Ishmaeli. He knew that mankind could not be changed by violent revolts and open war. Therefore, he formed a carefully considered scheme to secretly undermine what could not be openly attacked. Over the years, his league of hidden rebels, eventually succeeded in placing a man upon the throne. The long-term plans of these secret organisations must not be avoided. They do in fact plan decades and sometimes centuries ahead. Indeed, the degrees of initiation within the Freemasons of the Grand Lodge of Wisdom in Cairo were given by the Ismailis. They were called the most ancient and precious degrees of the Eastern secret societies and spread into the West from Cairo. The founder of the Ismailis was called the founder of the path and a God-made man. It all revolved around a method of controlling the mind. By reducing a man down and rebuilding him, one would own him. And here is the crux of the matter, and a reason for concern in modern times. Secret societies were rapidly becoming more than just a method of passing on true wisdom from generation to generation. It was now becoming a tool for control, for manipulation. Methods were being employed that turned men into sheep. As each man passed through the levels of the 9 degrees, he was stripped of his humanity. As soon as the proselyte arrived at the 9th degree, he was ripe to serve as a blind instrument to all the passions and above all limitless ambition for domination. The philosophy was reduced into a simple phrase: believe nothing and dare all. Religion was destroyed in the mind of the follower. All morals were eradicated. There was no other aim than to realise the projects of the masters, for whom it was said nothing was sacred. The secret instructions were simply to practice and gain great sleight of hand, so as to fascinate the eyes in order to work the miracles which are expected of you, to fool all. Today the numerous sects, Kabbalistic and Illuminati, much the same methods are used and the same doctrines taught. Nothing is sacred. Everything is acceptable to achieve the master's goal. Over thousands of years they were finally turning to the dark side. Through meditation and other forms, they believe they are achieving union again with the masters from whom they receive universal teachings. Their role is to carry out the great work of worldwide unification, religious, political and intellectual, to make a one-world government, a one-world agenda, to reunite the creative principle and bring about a new creation, a new world order, under the master. The question is, who is on the side of light and who is on the side of dark? We can see an element of the dark side originate in around 1090 AD, when Hassan Sabbah founded the Assassins. He had fled the House of Wisdom in Cairo because of his intrigues. He created a fortress when he bought the castle of Alamut on the Caspian Sea. Over time, he would gain many more. His assassins would strike terror into the heart of many, and he obtained great power. He assassinated caliphs and viziers. Upon his death, he was replaced, and the head would always be known as the Old Man of the Mountain. It spread far and wide and gave the British Empire a lot of trouble in India under the guise of the Thuggis. In the early years, they came into contact with, and often worked with, the Christian order of the Knights Templar, both understanding the mysteries in the same way. Indeed, these assassins were not true Muslims at all. The third degree in their initiation stated the denial of the truth of the Quran and all other sacred scriptures. They each learned of the many names of the brothers of the order, royal, sacerdotal and patrician, in all the parts of the world. They were to learn the allegorical meanings of the Quran and sacred scriptures. In fact, the amazing truth is this, that almost all the degrees of the assassins meet and match those of the 18th century degrees of the Illuminati. The reason, of course, is simple. They were one and the same. They were yet another name emerging from the darkness of a hidden order that had been influencing history for thousands of years. All things were allowed as long as it benefited the order, and this is still true to this day. In each of the many faces of the Illuminati, the sacred oaths are the same. The initiate first promises blind obedience. He then swears to communicate to none but his superiors any doubts he might have about the mysteries and doctrines. He swears to the hidden chiefs, by all that he holds dear, never to betray the methods to mortal man. They were and are taught that the literal meanings of all scriptures is purely for the vulgar, the uninitiated. The scriptures were for the mystical deification of man, not for the worship of a separate god. This self-deification was known as the hidden god, the god within not yet known or realized, hidden from the vulgar-minded. This is the Christ within. The assassins and all other secret societies that are and were part of the greater Illuminati world all attempt to attain the illumination. Rhythmic dancing, wine, blood, orgies and drugs, all used to achieve the desired result. The dark side of all this is simple. These methods became utilized to actually control those who believed they were being freed. They were being hypnotized in a similar way to the American secret operation MK Ultra did in the late 20th century. They are given a taste of paradise to come and promised eternity, and for this they swear allegiance to the Grand Master and will do whatever he bids. The assassins also had a hierarchy we can see in many other orders: a Grand Master, a Grand Prior, Masters, Companions, Guardians, Aspirants and Secret Brethren, mirrored almost perfectly by the Freemasons. The Grand Master, or Old Man of the Mountain, had 7 invisible imam, who were used to overthrow governments in the same way the Illuminati did in revolutionary France. They mirrored the Knights Templar, even though they were supposedly on different sides of the religious fence. The fundamental rule of the two orders was to seize fortresses and castles in neighbouring countries in order to control the people and finances. In essence, they united in this operation and even fought side by side. They were, and still are, a secret state within a state, ruled by secret sects that are part of a universal world state, ruled ultimately by the Illuminati masters. A supposedly separate sect at around the same time were the Druzes. They also originated in Egypt and were blamed for causing riots in Cairo. With this sect, we see a prediction that would be repeated in other so-called separate orders, and which seems to run as a thread throughout time and across the world. They, like today's Islamic State, predict the end of the world as we know it, and a new one to come. This is a long-standing prediction, and one that strangely may yet come true. They held that the end of the world was at hand, and will be signalled by a mighty army from the east under the guidance of a universal mind. The army will come from China, and Christians and Muslims will surrender and march towards Mecca, where the divine will appear before them. They claim that all the brotherhoods of the world have a part in bringing this prediction to pass, or in other words, making it happen. All of these Oriental beliefs are in fact the same. They all originate thousands of years ago in the Syrian and Persian secret sects who had come to an understanding or enlightenment regarding the existence of mankind, the light within and within which all knowledge was held. Whether they used drugs, dervish or meditation, the result was the same: the realization of our place in the universe. These beliefs were taken over by the dark side, who started to use it for power and control, and to bring about the unification of a one-world government which they control. Time was immaterial. The plan would come to fruition eventually, and the final throes of this plan would entail a massive Third World War, within which Islam and Christianity would somehow play a vital role. As time moved on, education brought with it materialism and secularism, and instead of turning to religion, man turned instead to rationality and science. In essence, the early scientists became scientists to understand the nature of God himself and our place in the universe, without the use of drugs, but through evidence. All along, the same people were holding up as the great scientists were in fact highly spiritual members of the secret orders, including people such as Isaac Newton. Mysticism was still rife in the world to explain the mysteries of consciousness. One name of a branch of the Illuminati that reared its head was Rosicrucianism. This mystic order spread first among the Germans, who were and have always been mystically inclined as a people. Nobody is entirely sure where and with whom it originated. The Order of the Rose and Cross, or Rosicrucian Order, has in fact existed since the dawn of time, just not under any particular name, and is in fact just another face of the Grand Illuminati's secret brotherhood. They called themselves the Invisibles, and they even created their own origin story to explain themselves. The story itself is a mystical allegory. The originator, they say, was Christian Rosenkreutz, who travelled to Damascus, the home of the Gnostic originators. He then travelled to meet the Magi, where he was called the Chosen One, who had been prophesied. He was initiated into the mysteries, taught magic, and sent back via Spain to Germany. All of his life, and even the story about his death, is an allegory. He never existed. His life is a teaching only to be understood by those with the knowledge. In the 17th century, at the same time that other secret orders were resurfacing. Following Catholic oppression, they released information into the world. This, along with many more things, started to bring about an enlightenment that would eventually see the powers of old royalty and religions fall. Their manifesto was simply to appear to be special and chosen, to attract others to a promised enlightenment, and to push them to revolt against a divided world of power-hungry royals. Thus, they would force revolution, and every revolution brings a desire for unity. On the face of it, Rosicrucianism shouted about the mysteries. It was composed of mystical Illuminism, in combination with alchemy, astrology, magnetism, and communication with the divine word. The name, in fact, is a clue to the age-old duality expressed by those we have already discussed. Rose is in fact ros, meaning dew or water. Cross is a symbol for fire. It is an occult and hidden symbol of duality, fire and water. A Rosicrucian is therefore a philosophy who by means of dew seeks the light, by the mother finds the father, uniting them both, creating the Christ. The rest of the story of the tomb wherein is buried Christian Rosenkreutz is a retelling of the ancient mysteries, such as the tale of Osiris from Egypt. Unlike the Egyptian Ankh cross, the rosy cross was a symbol of duality and therefore life-creating. How marvellous and wonderful all of this must have seemed, and yet it is another retelling of an ancient story. Why do this? Because this is how the secrets are passed on from generation to generation. A story of Osiris would be of no use in Germany, and so a new one is created or retold for a new age and a different culture. The basics remain the same, and understanding and meanings behind these stories helps us to highlight them whenever they reappear, as they did in the 1970s when Star Wars came out. Freemasonry, a long-standing occult-based secret society, has all these stories within it and more. Most members have absolutely no idea what any of it means and simply repeat the rituals because that's how they join and stay members. We cannot look at all members of the Freemasons and accuse them of running the world because they have no idea. However, because it has been a sponge of tradition and legend, it has been a useful tool to keep the golden thread of knowledge alive. It has also been a useful global tool for high-powered members of the real Illuminati to manipulate, as it did so in the French and American revolutions, even to the murder of presidents such as Abraham Lincoln. As mankind raced towards the Great Enlightenment and the glories of the brutal French Revolution, several masters appeared to the world from their dark hideouts. They did so to ensure the plan they had formulated came to fruition. One such master went by the name of Pernety, and he founded or revealed the Illuminati of Avignon. He was born in 1716 and became a Benedictine monk, where he learned the mysteries from those hidden within the Catholic Church. Here, he learned all about the Hermetic arts, and in 1766 he founded the Hermetic Rite, the Illuminati of Avignon. It grew and spread, and he moved to Berlin. It is claimed he had a powerful angelic guide who gave instructions. As with most of these stories, we have to understand that this itself was symbolic to hide the truth from the ordinary person. He wrote books in occult numbers and codes that are difficult to decipher. Pernity, it was said, was to found a new people of God, and he grew so influential that he built a temple. They kept absolute secrecy. They did their work, spread the mystical ideas, and rebuffed the old ways. Their influence was at large. When Pernity died, his huge numbers of followers were simply swallowed up by another branch of the secret Illuminati, the Martinists. These Martinists were based in Paris, where their work was coming to a final conclusion with the French Revolution. They had allied themselves with that other infamous branch created by Adam Weishaupt and known to the world as the Illuminati. Generally, to the esoteric world of the occult, all these groups come under a name, the Illumins. Whether they claim to be Rosicrucian, Illuminati, Assassin or Freemason, the ultimate thread that spawns them all is ancient and based upon the very things we have been discovering: illumination. The Illumins exercise extreme secrecy and influence society in multiple ways. As the Comte de Vereux pointed out just before the French Revolution, there is a conspiracy being plotted so well planned and so deep that it will be very difficult for religion and governments not to succumb to it. He was, of course, totally correct, and religion and government did succumb. In fact, the same thing has been going on for millennia. Evidence discovered by us for this documentary gives a list of names over the course of time that were in fact masters of the Order of Illumins. These include Jesus, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar Jacques de Molay, Paracelsus, the Jesuit-influenced occult author Cazotti, mystics Cagliostro, Eliphas Levi and Saint Martin, Polish philosopher Wronski, and hundreds more. The ancient message with these names states this: Shouldst thou reveal the least of the secret arts or any part of the hidden mysteries that meditation may have led thee to understand, there is no physical torture that is not sweet compared to the punishment that thy folly shall bring upon thee. Their purpose is also revealed as the Masters are committed to work with all their strength to establish on earth the association of all interests, the federation of all nations, the alliance of all cults and universal solidarity. In other words, their own personal goal is the Masters' bidding, to establish a one-world government. This text is from 1913, not 1713, and comes from the same sources. It proves, beyond doubt, that the establishment of a one-world government has been an ongoing affair for a very long time. At the time, the plans for the First World War had been completed, and they knew this particular revolution would not end until the 1940s. As the French Revolution was getting underway, the hidden order of the warrior monks, the Templars, was resurfacing. Their aim, of course, just like that of the Freemasons, was to re-establish the Temple of Solomon. This simply meant to establish the divine, perfect human, the chosen race. They were, like most of the others, Kabbalists and Gnostics, the very reasons the power of the Catholic Church needed them to go. They did disband in the 14th century, but they lived on under different names. They were governed by unknown illumines, and being revealed only to those who had passed through the highest number of degrees of initiation. As the French monarchy had done away with them in the 14th century, it was only fitting that they should see through the destruction of the monarchy in the 18th. One of those men on the list of masters, Cagliostro, was in fact a member, having been initiated in Frankfurt with the members of the Illuminati. By the power of just a spoken word, these masters of the Illuminati could animate thousands of men across Europe and the world. All men obedient to masters they would never see. All men in positions of authority, power, education, commerce, and military. All sleepers awaiting a call to action. And the call came, and France fell under the dark sky of bloody revolution.
Present your pieces! Prepare to give fire! Give fire!
And those who did not carry out their orders were under no illusions as to their fate. Death would come to he who even in the lightest thing infringes the order which he had received from the chief, or refuses to execute them. For nothing is unimportant in the sublime order. You must consecrate yourself entirely to the order. The secret government, but not less powerful, must lead other governments towards this noble aim, without, however, allowing itself to be perceived, except through the universal opinion and assent of society. There exists a considerable number of our brothers. We are spread throughout most distant lands, all led by an invisible force. If you desire only to be a perjurer and a false brother, do not pledge yourself among us. You will be cursed and unhappy. Our vengeance will reach you everywhere. Strong words indeed, and these words came to the initiate years before he would be allowed to see any real secrets. By the height of Illuminati power, the French Revolution was an established fact. Secret societies under various guises, and yet all united, had brought about a massive change in the world, and would do so again and again. They had emerged from the darkness to plot and scheme, and had been seen. French observer de Luchette wrote, "There are a certain number of people who have arrived at the highest degree of imposture. They have conceived the project of reigning over opinions, and of conquering not kingdoms nor provinces, but the human mind. This project is gigantic, and has something of madness in it, which causes neither alarm nor uneasiness. But when we descend to details, when we regard what passes before our eyes of the hidden principles, when we perceive a sudden revolution in favour of ignorance and incapacity, we must look for the cause of it, and if we find that a revealed and known system explains all the phenomena, which succeed each other with terrifying rapidity, how can we not believe it? Observe that members of the mystical confederation are numerous in themselves. If several men mix together half qualities, they temper and strengthen each other. Some watch while others act, and this formidable ensemble arrives at its goal. It was according to this that the sect of the Illuminati was formed. One cannot, it is true, either name its founders or prove the epochs of its existence, or mark the steps of its growth, for its essence is the secret. Its acts take place in darkness. Its evasive grand priests are lost in the crowd. However, it has penetrated sufficient things to astonish and draw the attention of observers, friends of humanity, to the mysterious steps of the sect. The roles of this particular branch of the Illuminati were simple. They were an active spy ring, operating espionage, terrorism and infiltration. They spread rapidly and ran so deep they even infiltrated other groups that were part of the whole. Through their unique use of the confession, they sought out opposition and eradicated them. In league with the secret assassin groups, Templars and others, they saw through the biggest political upheaval in European history until the world wars were brought about. They then simply slipped away, back into the darkness. The truth is, of course, that the thousands of members utilised for the short period of its existence did not just disappear. They simply moved sideways, back into their other orders, such as the Freemasons. Many Masonic historians tried desperately to claim that their lineage stretches right back to the Temple of Solomon and the builder Hiram Abiff. They are even told it as a fact in their ceremonies. Others claim descent from Roman and Greek stonemasons and the Roman augurs, who had special knowledge of the lay of the land and energies related to our modern day perception of ley lines and feng shui. There can be no strict proof for any of this, albeit likely that the secret knowledge has been passed down the centuries from one adept and initiate to another. The general consensus has the Freemasons emerging from the medieval stonecutters, who are known as operative masons. They are skilled craftsmen who built the great cathedrals and churches of Europe for the Catholic Church, and who included many mysterious images and secrets within their amazing carvings. They were known as soft masons or Freemasons, as the carving was free work or soft stone. This version of the history of the Masons claims the lodge evolved from the huts erected on site by those medieval masons. As time progressed, the Masons grew in power due to the demand for their services and formed groups or unions which became known as lodges. By the 1600s, the lodges began admitting men who were not operative masons and were termed gentlemen masons. The terms developed over time within the operative Masonic lodges and were taken on by those gentlemen masons, becoming part and parcel of their ritual nature. However, there are problems with this version of history. The facts state something quite different, although there is no reason to deny that gentlemen did indeed begin to grow in number within the ranks of the Masons. There is indeed plenty of evidence to show that in the 14th century the Masons were already a well-established group and indeed accepted, or were evolved by, the inclusion of the Knights Templar that had escaped Catholic suppression to Scotland. The first official documentation we have is from 1356 and is actually from England and describes the formation of the London Masons' Company and the ordinances governing the lodge that was already established at York Minster. However, these are not the only papers that have survived and speak of groups that were forming. It does not deny the fact that there must have been pre-existing groups that do not have paperwork to prove their pre-existence. The only odd evidence we do have is the symbolism being employed within the great building works of Europe from the 11th century. Now, understanding that this great building exercise erupted with such a vengeance following the First Crusade, and the setting up of such organisations as the Knights Templar and Cistercians, who themselves were incidental in bringing back building skills to Europe, is the first part of the puzzle. The Templars and their non-warrior cousins, the Cistercians, were more than incidental in both bringing back the seed of alchemical enlightenment from the Crusades, but also the building skills of the Islamic Middle Eastern world. This is seen in the arch and the octagonal designs incorporated into most Templar and Cistercian buildings, as well as other building works carried out under their tutelage. But also into these structures are huge amounts of numerological symbols and mystical metaphors. These methods were understood and carried on by the Freemasons, who today ritualize these ancient ways and probably do not even understand their correct purpose. These mystical building metaphors are as ancient as Stonehenge or the Great Pyramids, even if the term Freemason is not. By the mid-17th century, there is definite evidence of large-scale Masonic lodges, as Elias Ashmole, the creator of the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, records in his diary that he was made a Mason in the lodge at his father-in-law's house. Many today split up the Masonic lodges into operative, accepted and free Masonry. However, they are much like the Catholic Church's subgroups and the monasteries like Cistercians, Franciscans and even Jesuits. They are all from the same original source. The Bible, and specifically the Temple of Solomon, gave them a religious and acceptable framework to work on, and the symbolism employed with the operative Mason's tools was worked to match the ancient mysteries such as the as above so below Hermetic principle. Today the Freemasons are a global phenomenon, with members from across the business community, religious establishments and politics. The influence they have is obviously huge and universal. They have links with many other orders, such as the Sovereign Order of the Knights of Malta, and have had over the years a lot of bad press for the influence they have brought to bear. They have swallowed up other institutions, such as the 18th century Weishaupt Illuminati. Part of this influence has been shown by hundreds of authors who have had effect all over the world and have been more than incidental in the instigating of full or part the revolutions in France, Russia and even the American War of Independence. A lot of the historical texts seem to point at a war between the Catholic Church and the Freemasons. This is an interesting point, and one that confuses many people when they see that the Masons are actually linked and were created by the Catholic Church. This is a standard ploy used by Secret Service people across the world, and even to be found within the statutes of many secret societies and even religious orders. It was the done thing, to appear on the outside to be against the powers of authority, whilst all the time working for them. To win a football match, own both sides. The facts were fairly clear on this one. The Freemasons can clearly be shown to have evolved from esoteric sects emanating from within the Catholic Church, and as a direct result of Templar influence in Scotland. So the Masons could be traced back to the Catholic Church. So what influence does the Guild of Freemasons have today? Well, as businessmen, no, plenty of other business people, and there is a very large number of them that have the handshake. Many of these are small businessmen, but as the sea is made up of many drops of water, it is still water. Many of them are more than that though, and are quite big and influential in the business world. Almost cyclically the public get outraged by newspaper stories about Masonic influence, and we have a purge. People forget newspaper stories very quickly, and the influence of the Masons carries on as before. The Masons have also been implicated in many communistic activities, and certainly in the Russian Revolution, a country, it will be noted, was orthodox and therefore too far removed from Catholicism. So, there is a lot of influence brought to bear by the Masons around the world. Most presidents of America, prime ministers, in fact world leaders, tend to be connected to the Freemasons, let alone the royal families, who are patrons, and even bishops and cardinals. So, this goes back to the Templars, a Catholic order. It also goes back to the Knights of St. John or Knights of Malta. Both the Templars and the Knights of Malta have re-emerged from within the Masons and are now orders themselves, in various forms. Most still owe allegiance to the Masons, but are distinct. The Knights of Malta can directly be traced back to their origin and are now located in the Vatican. Now, the Jesuits are certainly part of the Catholic Church and originally influenced the Illuminati. They created a secular and separate society which later formed back into the Masons, which were created by the Catholics anyway. There is appearing a glimmer of that central part of the wheel. Before the Illuminati merged into the Masons, they had been implicated in the creation of several other groups, such as the Rosicrucians, Golden Dawn, and even the Lutherans and Protestants. There is one group which came to light in the 1980s, which sent a shiver down the spine of the world: P2, or Propaganda Due. This group were a Masonic group set up in the 19th century Italy by the Grand Orient Lodge of Italy. In 1976, the Freemasons closed down P2, but it continued under its own authority. Originally, it evolved specifically out of the Carbonari, or charcoal burners, a spurious title to attract the people, no doubt, and the name of one of the most murderous societies ever to have existed. They were even written about by Conan Doyle in his Sherlock Holmes stories. In the 1820s, this group of charcoal burners were more than just powerful. They virtually ran the country. Their origins are amazingly similar to the Masons in that they claim to have begun in Scotland, the famed resting place of the last Knights Templar. They claim that Queen Isabel of Scotland was on the throne when the King of France was Francis. Francis made contact with a bunch of successful mystics when he stayed into their territory. They were called charcoal burners, and their territory was Scotland. Something is afoot here though, as France does not share a frontier with Scotland. Neither was there a Queen Isabel. The very idea of the Carbonari being mystics and from Scotland seems fanciful, but it is based upon beliefs of origin. They believe they originated there, and so who are we to doubt them? In fact, it tells us their true origin lies within the Masonic order, and via them to the Templars. It also tells us that they believe their origins to be mystics, those individuals who experience part of the enlightenment process. P2, who claim descent from the Carbonari, came to the forefront in the 1980s scandal of the Banco Ambrosiano. This was one of Milan's principal banks, which collapsed in 1982 with debts of between $700 million and $1.5 billion, followed quickly by the death of its president, Roberto Calvi, who was found hanging like a mason under Blackfriars Bridge. Blackfriars Bridge is a notoriously Masonic symbolic location of Italian design. Calvi, who fled Italy following the collapse of the bank, and so was not intending suicide, which is generally done in one's own backyard, and so it must have been murder. It appears from the information we could gather that the money had actually been siphoned off by the Institute of Religious Works, a Catholic Church front, and so the 80 million lira that the Catholic Church was complaining about losing was actually going back into the Catholic Church. Calvi was implicated in his affair and was later found to be a member of the secret P2 lodge run by Licio Gelli, an ex-member of the SS. In 1992, Calvi's body was exhumed and murder was proven. The case was therefore reopened in 2003. In Rome, prosecutors implicated Pippo Calò as Calvi's murderer. Calò was a member of the Sicilian Mafia, a secret group of villains who are strongly supportive of the Catholic Church and linked to the Masons in various guises. 2 former members of P2 have given away some information which relates to our story, and which had been missed by many for its real importance. The story goes that there is a villa in Tuscany where, hidden in the courtyard, there is a ritual fountain shaped like a rearing cobra, with an inflated hood and a single eye. Inside this all-seeing eye is a camera which keeps check on visitors. This is the striking cobra, the great one-eyed shining one of the very centre of a modern-day secret society with links into the heart of Catholicism and implicated in the assassination of none other than Pope John Paul I. The next thing that happened in Italy following the revelations of P2 was the collapse of the government. If this is not political influence, then what is? Let us now turn to the Bilderbergers. The Bilderberger Group is an informal, secretive, transatlantic council of key decision makers developed between 1952 and 1954. It brought leading European and American personalities together once a year for informal discussions of their differences. The formation of the American wing of Bilderberg was entrusted to Eisenhower's Psychological Warfare Coordinator, C.D. Jackson, and the funding for the first meeting held at the Hotel de Bilderberg in Holland in 1954 was provided by the CIA. Therefore, much of its funding came from the Ford Foundation. The subjects over which the annual meetings ranged were wide, but it is clear that the 1957 Treaty of Rome was nurtured by discussions at Bilderberg the previous year. This modern-day group of the powerful elite has been accused on an international basis of forming the brains behind a new world order. On the other hand, they themselves claim that the Bilderberg Group is simply a meeting of those in power in order to discuss, in a free and easy way, the concerns of the world leaders. What does appear to come out of this meeting are 2 other groups, also called to account by the conspiracy theorists, namely the Trilateral Commission and the Council on Foreign Relations. One of the key institutions that has fostered unity and cooperation with the Atlantic community beyond the old concepts has been the Bilderberger Group. The origins of this group rest with one man, Joseph Ratzinger, a Catholic who had links to the Jesuit order. He even recommended the turning of Hungary, Austria and Poland into a tripartite state under the guidance of the Jesuit order. The plan was dropped. Sir Edward Bennington Behrens said, "I remember Ratzinger in the United States picking up the telephone and immediately making an appointment with the President, and in Europe he had complete entree into every political circle as a kind of right acquired through trust, devotion and loyalty he inspired." With a good war record, Ratzinger was certainly involved in secret and underground works, even parachuting into occupied Germany at the age of 58. He founded the European movement, which gave rise to the Council of Europe in 1949. Ratzinger believed in unity, and to that end it did not really matter how the unity was brought about. He certainly liked to be involved with big business and the influence that they created within the general public. We are, after all, tied to our television screens and led by marketing men. The political and religious differences in the world which created the disunity between certain states, he believed, could be brought together through a corporate ideal. If everybody wanted the same thing, they would all be the same. A market-led revolution was, and strangely still is, taking place. Russia, as the USSR collapsed and is now in the process of commercialization, the same will be and is true of China. This commercialization is creeping across the world like an invading force. In many respects, this could be seen as a kind of communism by the back door, which has been claimed was instigated by the Masons on the orders of the Catholic Church, or even Illuminati. Anyway, Ratzinger did have left-wing policies, and with this connection to the Jesuits, there are obvious links to take into consideration, not least of which is the Catholic Church. Involving Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, Rettinger began his crusade by starting on America, who he believed to be essential to world peace. The prince held an important position in Royal Dutch Petroleum, or Shell, and was involved in several international corporations, and so had influence that the Americans and others would respect. In 1952, it was proposed by Rettinger that there should be an open and frank discussion between the disparate organisations and individuals that controlled the world. This should be in secret to allow those taking part to air their views without the worry of it appearing in the newspapers the next day. This was the birth of the Bilderberger Group, which was named after the hotel where the meetings were originally held. In short, Bilderberg is a recognised, flexible and informal international leadership forum in which different viewpoints can be expressed and mutual understanding enhanced. And now we turn to the Trilateral Commission. According to their own words, the Trilateral Commission was formed in 1973 by private citizens in Japan, Europe and North America to foster closer cooperation among those core, democratic, industrialised areas of the world with shared leadership responsibilities in the wider international system. Originally established for 3 years, our work has been renewed for successive triennia or 3-year periods. The Trilateral Commission is a private organisation, founded in 1973 at the initiative of David Rockefeller. It consists of over 300 private citizens from the 3 areas of Europe, Japan and North America, and is there to promote closer cooperation between these 3 areas. There has been a lot of scrutiny on the Trilateral Commission, and it has been implicated strongly in many conspiracy theories. However, with as many members as it has, there is no surprise that some of them will be connected to other organisations, such as the Catholic Knights of Malta, Jesuits and Freemasons. Not least of these is Mr. Rockefeller, former president of the Chase Manhattan Bank and corporate king. A powerful organisation with links to all other groups. And now we turn to the Rosicrucians. The earliest real documentation of the Rosicrucian ideals is from 1597. It is said that a certain alchemist travelled across Europe seeking to begin a society to carry out his newly discovered alchemical ideals. The Farmer Fraternitas and a general reformation of the world appeared in 1614 as fully fledged documents, and so he must have succeeded. The founder is claimed to be a Christian Rosenkreuz, which is obviously a false name and means the rosy cross of the Christians. It is claimed that this character travelled across Arabia, studied at Fez in Egypt, and returned to Europe with his message. A message, we might add, that is decidedly ancient and was originally created by the Sumerian Shining Ones. The origin of this enigmatic group then is false, and therefore created by whoever did begin the order. What clues do we have? The coat of arms of Martin Luther, that staunch anti-Catholic, included the rose and cross. There are also parallels with Arabic Illuminati schools such as those of the Gilani, who was known as the Shining Rose. However, when we look at the origins of Masonry and the rituals and beliefs held within, we actually find they are not dissimilar. It appears that Rosicrucianism is yet another form of that Catholic breed, diaspora, just like the Jesuit creation of the Illuminati, drawing on the undercurrents of mysticism to create a seemingly anti-self organisation. Just like the Freemasons, the Alumbrados or Illuminated ones, the Illuminati and dozens of other groups around at the time, the Rosicrucian ways were linked to the influential Sufi mystics who had influenced the world for such a long time. The methods required the deepest of concentration upon the master, that absolute adherence to the way was normal. It was another method of control, and the void left behind by the strictness and rigidity of Catholicism was easily filled by hundreds of such groups, including the emerging Protestants. Today the Rosicrucians are a worldwide order with thousands of members, but their influence on the world now is minimal, although there is a hint in one of their books which tells us that their influence of the person or soul they call the ego will keep returning to constantly make alterations to the way forward for mankind. Though by many outsiders the existence of Christian Rosencreutz is regarded as a myth, it is nevertheless true that his birth marked the beginning of a new epoch in the spiritual life of the Western world. That particular ego has also been in continuous incarnation ever since, in one form or another, of the European countries, taking a new body as his successive vehicles outlived their usefulness, or circumstances rendered it expedient that he changed the scene of his activities. Moreover, he is incarnate today, an initiate of high degree, an active and potent factor in all affairs of the West. Although unknown to the world, he is the Grand Master of the Illuminati. As are all such individuals, he is a representative at a central conclave of the Elder Brothers of humanity. His mission was, and is, to show the spiritual significance of all scientific discoveries, thus counteracting as far as possible the deadening influence of materialistic science, which the Elder Brothers dread more than any other manifestation of human activity. To this end, he laboured with the alchemists centuries before the advent of modern science. He, through an intermediary, inspired the now mutilated works of Bacon, Jacob Boehm, and others received through him the inspiration which makes their work so spiritually illuminating. In the works of the immortal Goethe and the masterpieces of Wagner, the same influence meets us. It is the same source or ego from where all spiritual illumination has derived. This particular ego has been manifesting itself throughout time. However, it is the same shining influence throughout man's history that has been making these moves, stepping in and out of the scene as cerebral evolution has moved mankind forward. These Rosicrucians call this influence the central conclave of the Elder Brothers. We call them the Shining Ones or Illuminati. The same process of illumination is held within the secrets of Rosicrucianism. It hides from the profane, but reveals to the initiate the more clearly how he is to labour day by day to make for himself that choicest of all gems, the philosopher's stone, more precious than the Koh-i-Noor, than the sum of all earthly wealth. Apparently Christ himself wrought this marvellous stone while incarnate in the body of Jesus. The Reichsanzeiger said in one article, "Yes, there is a philosopher's stone. It is an elixir of life. It is all, and much more than has ever been claimed for it. Moreover, most people have had it in their hands often, but know it not." How true that is, yet at the same time how thoroughly misleading. None can guess save those who know the secret, but even the eavesdropping traitor who had listened and overheard the words spoken among the brethren could have profited thereby. The writer of this text then points out that to those who have entitled to the knowledge, many a mystery will reveal itself between the lines in this work, suggested but not spoken, for to reveal them, save from the lip to ear to worthy persons and under proper circumstances, would be a grievous breach of faith, not to be contemplated. The secrets held within the pages of that 1910 book are simply now to behold, and upon the reading the text, keeping in mind the spiritual experience outlined by the existence of the Shining Ones, reveals nothing more than the enlightenment experience, the illumination of the Illuminati. We are even told that in order to become an initiate, we cannot simply apply. We will be watched from the sidelines, and our merits in this life counted towards being offered the golden key to the temple. Of course, in 1910 there was no World Wide Web, and today we find this once influential secret society now offering courses with credit card payments. Although they still claim to be teachers of the mysteries and custodians of the sacred teachings of a spiritual power more potent in the life of the Western world than any of the visible governments, though they may not interfere with humanity so as deprive them of their free will. Of course, reading between the lines, this implies that they are indeed an invisible government. This secret government take the form of 7 brothers who go out into the world whenever occasion requires, appearing as men among other men, or working in their invisible vehicles with or upon others as needed. Yet it must be strictly kept in mind that they never influence anyone against their will or contrary to their desires, but only strengthen good wherever found. Of course, a person's will is dependent upon what has already been influencing him or her, and good is relative. We must now turn to the Nazi Party. In the late 19th and early 20th century, Germany was in a particular political position. It needed to rediscover its own identity following the loss of its Holy Roman imperial power. To this end, secret societies sprang up under the guise of esoteric and philosophical schools. From this base emerged what was to become one of the world's most dangerous secret societies, the German Order. One man, more than any other, can be identified as the driving force behind this wave: Baron Rudolf Freyer von Sebottendorf. It was von Sebottendorf who was more than incidental in growing the Thule Society, which came out of the German Order. This Thule Society was a new secret group based supposedly upon ancient Nordic mythology, but in reality was more Eastern than most writers realise. In 1918, von Sebottendorf purchased the Münchner Bunker, a weekly Munich newspaper, which he transformed into an anti-Semitic scandal sheet and the Thule Society's official publication. The Thule Society went on to give birth to the Nazi Party, and the rest is history. It amazingly transpires that von Sebottendorf was an adopted Turkish citizen with links in the now infamous Sufi tradition, and an adept of the mysteries. No wonder then that the later Thule Society and the Nazi Party should have mystical leanings. It has also been claimed that his real European name was Adam Alfred Rulfold Blauer, and that he was involved in Bavarian anti-communist struggles. Amazingly, he was also a Freemason, and just prior to World War I, he had made several trips to the Near East, where he became involved in the mystery tradition. In the Balkan War of 1912-13, he was implicated in directing the Turkish Red Crescent, and was made Master of the Order of the Rose Garland or Rosenkranz. All of this is at the height of Rosicrucian fame in Europe, and as we have seen, they are more potent in the life of the Western world than any other visible governments. In 1910, while living in Istanbul, von Sebottendorf controlled his own secret society based on a combination of Islamic Sufi mysticism, masonry, alchemy, and anti-Bolshevik ideology, the perfect occult base for the Nazi Party. It transpires that he eventually established a sect of devotees along the lines of the Fedayeen, or assassins, who were guided by their spiritual leader, the Old Man of the Mountain. He had basically set up a semi-religious and militant secret society that's purpose was to change the world. According to Dr. Walter Johann Stein, the Thule Society was a society of assassins, holding secret meetings and issuing death orders. This murderous method of political change had been brought to the German Thule Society by von Sebottendorf, who spread the word through his newspaper interests. Franz Gertner, the then President of Police in Munich, was a member of the Inner Circle and later became Minister of Justice under the Third Reich. The Thule Society served as the recruiting and political platform front of the German Order. In 1918, the Workers' Political Circle, with the Thule Society representative Karl Harrer as chairman, was set up, and in 1919 this became the German Workers' Party. Only 1 year later, this became the Nazi Party under the leadership of Adolf Hitler. There were links between these organisations, as von Sebottendorf himself stated. Thule members were the people to whom Hitler first turned and who first allied themselves with Hitler. The ancient Sufi tradition had influenced the West to a greater degree than previously believed. But here, the Thule Society, we have von Sebottendorf bringing Sufi and Islamic mysticism directly into the German political state. Sebottendorf is even on record as having stated that Muslim masters had entrusted him with illuminating Germany, and he did so by allying Sufism to ancient Aryan mythology. Following the rise of Adolf Hitler, who discovered the society after he had been ordered to spy on them, von Sebottendorf's newspaper was bought out by Dietrich Eckart, a Bavarian Catholic who had helped form the German Workers' Party, and thus the newspaper was now under German rule for obvious reasons. It was Eckart who introduced Hitler to the more esoteric ways of the world, and it was Eckart who transcribed Mein Kampf. When they came to power, Hitler set up the SS, a secret order of the Silver Star, who went out initiating people into the mysteries. Close ties to Turkey were still in place, as the mass exterminations of both countries show. Eckart himself was highly influenced by the Eastern mysticism and was a follower of Aleister Crowley's movement. In fact, some researchers have even claimed that Crowley influenced the Nazi occult movement to such a degree that it may have been through him that the secret brotherhood were working and thereby influencing Hitler and his motley crew. The occult was rife within the Nazi party, as Himmler's death head units were to show with their ritualised murders, harking back to Celtic head cults. Not to mention Himmler's occult-inspired SS, who were headquartered at the castle Wewelsburg in Westphalia, where there was a round table with 13 seats. In 1935, Himmler's SS established the Ahnenarbe, or ancestral heritage, to seek out occult secrets that would aid the Nazi party to victory. They travelled across the world to Tibet, South America, Rennes-le-Château and other special places of occult interest. Without doubt, the whole remit of the Nazi party was to establish an occult-based theology in a political forum. It was their attempt to re-establish something that they had perceived had already been lost. It was nothing new. The same thing had already been done in America, where the Masonic influence had established a Masonic constitution, and the political family of the USA was and would be forever based around arcane Masonic and occult secrets. So what was this Thule, and does it give us any clues as to the secrets of this occult takeover? Thule was named after a fabled island much like Atlantis or Lemuria. It was believed to have been situated somewhere in the north and was lost a long time ago, along with its highly developed and intelligent civilization. But the secrets of this ancient race were not lost. They were instead to be found within the myths and mysteries of the ancient world. Amazingly, followers of the Thule Society believed that their masters, hiding in the background, who occasionally influenced the human race, just as the Theosophists and Rosicrucians believed, these were the Great White Brotherhood, or Illuminati. Only the true initiate could establish contact with these masters through magic ritual, and once contacted, the initiate would be empowered with great skills and superhuman strength. These extra skills were given to enable the initiate to create the conditions for the master race, the Aryans, to populate the earth and thus exterminate the inferior races. This element of extermination was more obvious during the war with the Holocaust, but it was also used to undermine the strengths of other countries. In Bavaria, left-wing socialists proclaimed the Bavarian Soviet Republic. However, this communist movement was not to be tolerated, and so a counter-movement was set up, not surprisingly identified as the Whites. They were probably called the Free Corps, and were financed by the Thule Society, bringing swift defeat to the newly formed Soviet Republic, and yet another example of how a secret society grounded on the ancient mysteries created by the Illuminated ones could influence the world. Hitler himself had been on the ground in 1919 as a soldier who went in after the revolution had been put down. His purpose was to select new recruits and to investigate those who had opposed, which he did ruthlessly. This in turn led to Hitler being given a role in the intelligence division of the German army. He was now both inside the official army and on the outside a member of a secret society with intentions of taking power. Through the ranting of Gottfried Feder of the Thule Society and others like him, Hitler was secured as a recruit and was more and more intrigued by the anti-Semitic rhetoric of the group. Soon, Hitler was in charge of the propaganda in the Thule Society. There are literally hundreds of instances we could cite to show that the Thule Society and other secret societies were inciting all kinds of changes within Europe. But just those few collated facts are sufficient to show that the politics of the day was not all what we had previously believed it to be. And so we must move to the hub, the Catholic Church. According to the official statements, the Catholic Church simply kept quiet during the Hitler reforms. They even claimed that many Catholic priests were victimised by the Nazis for their part in freeing Jews and other non-desirables. This is indeed true. The Catholic Church did remain quiet, and there were individuals within the Church that stood up for the rights of man. However, there is a darker side to the Catholic role in the running of the Nazi war and Holocaust machines. As a child, Adolf Hitler attended classes at a Benedictine monastery, which is where he first saw the now infamous swastika. Here he sang in the choir and claimed that he dreamt one day of taking holy orders, thus showing early on his allegiance to the Catholic Church. "I am now, as before, a Catholic and will always remain so," he is reported to have said to one of his generals. The Catholic Church, in fact, never excommunicated him. The stark fact remains that the Catholic Church turned a blind eye to the Nazi oppression, especially as it had just spent the last few centuries trying to rid the world of Jewry itself. In fact, taken to this end, and the hidden links between Freemasonry and the Catholic Church, we can start to see a picture of a Christian purging of the Jews in process, a process that appears to have been going on for an awful long time. Some have claimed, however, that this was a balancing act, in that the Jews were getting too powerful in Europe at the time and needed trimming. The Catholic deal with the Nazis involved having further privileges for its priests and even permission to get involved in the public school system, with a massive $400 million of state aid. It also led to a clearing of anti-Catholic lawsuits, as by 1940 Hitler had erased or quashed over 7,000 legal cases against Catholic priests. All in all, the Catholic Church was doing quite well out of the process. A concordat with the Catholic Church in 1933 stated the following: "The German Reich guarantees the freedom of the profession and public exercise of the Catholic religion, and that Catholics shall enjoy the protection of the state in the same manner as the employees of the state." It goes on: "The teaching of the Catholic religion in the elementary, vocational, secondary and superior schools shall be a regular subject, and shall be given in conformity with the principles of the Catholic Church." To the Catholics this was all perfect, and so why should they make life hard for the Nazis? To the Nazis the deal was perfect. They gained prestige and seemingly backing from the Roman Catholics. They also needed to ensure that their allies of the future, Italy, would not be upset. Many authors have in fact shown that even following the end of the war, the Nazis were aided in their escapes by their brothers in the Catholic Church, escaping via monasteries and nunneries and into deeply Catholic countries in South America, especially with the aid of certain Jesuits. Franz von Papen was the Chancellor of Germany between 1932 and 33 and first Vice-Chancellor of the Third Reich under Adolf Hitler. Papen has been called Hitler's mentor, and to this end he should have theoretically known what Hitler himself was thinking. Papen gives us an insight into these thoughts in his book My Conversations with Hitler. Hitler has put into practice the high ideals of the papacy. What exactly Papen means by this we really cannot say, but it implies the obvious, that Adolf Hitler was working directly for the Pope. So who is von Papen? It turns out that without Papen, Hitler would have struggled to gain power. Papen made the way smooth for Hitler's rise to power, as is shown by him receiving the Vice-Chancellery following Hitler gaining the Chancellery. Papen was born to a very wealthy Catholic family in Westphalia and served in the First World War in Turkey, where he was to serve again during the Second World War as ambassador. On his return from the First World War, he joined politics on the far right, and in 1932 was plucked from obscurity by President Hindenburg to be Chancellor. It was this friendship that allowed Hitler's rise to power. As previously, Hindenburg had said that he would never allow Hitler to become Chancellor. Franz von Papen, it seems, was highly influential individual in the politics of Nazi Germany, and he was also a Jesuit. High ideals of the Catholic Church indeed. Papen saw through several elements which helped the integration of the Catholic ideals, including mixing the Catholic youth with the Hitler youth, and signing the Concordat between the Vatican and Munich. Incidentally, the Cardinal Secretary of State who signed the document on the Vatican's behalf was Archbishop Eugenio Pacelli, who was later to become Pope Pius XII. Adolf Hitler wrote, "The Catholic Church will gain more and more blind support as a static pole amid the flight of appearances." It would not be the first time that the Catholic Church has been implicated in the running of state, and it will not be the last. And so we turn to another Catholic order, the Knights of Malta. This order can truly be traced back to the Crusades in one long and perfect historical line, without wondering whether it reformed or not. There are some modern orders that have similar names, but they are mimicking the true order, which is now in Rome, after having been kicked out of Rhodes and Malta by several invading armies. As the Knights of St. John, they were highly influential, much like the Templars, and were linked to the Hospitallers in Malta. When the Templars were disbanded, a lot of them simply merged with the Knights of St. John, and took with them their mystical ways and knowledge. Now they have connections across the world, and are a sovereign order, which means they have ambassadors, and hold political sway, as well as the all-important diplomatic immunity. It maintains diplomatic relations with Europe, North America, South America and Asia, with the authority of the Holy See. It has specialised agencies in the United Nations and other international organisations. In the UK, the Order of St. John of Jerusalem is a branch of the Knights of Malta, and out of it came the Order of the Garter, to which the main players in old politics in the UK must be affiliated. They are directly responsible to the Pope and have linked by hundreds of conspiracy theories to many scandals. For instance, in the 1980s, Colonel Oliver North authorised an exchange of guns for drugs to finance the Contras in Nicaragua. In order to sort this out, Colonel North needed connections in the underworld and got involved with the Mafia, the CIA and many other shady organisations and characters. One of these was Al Capone, who was also a colonel in the US Army. He was also a member of the Sovereign Military Order of the Knights of Malta. So far then, we have found nothing new about the world. All of this information is widely available at the click of a mouse. But what is new in thinking is that all of these branches are just from one tree. They have all been spawned from the same mother and father, and they can all be traced down the evolutionary timeline and back to ancient Sumeria and the Illuminated ones. Take the Freemasons. They are supposedly a God-fearing Protestant organisation doing good for the community. They can be proven to have come from the Catholic Templars. The Templars showed allegiance to the Catholic Church and the Pope. The Catholic Church sprang from a Roman imperialistic intrusion into the world of religion. These religions were all basically following the same beliefs and all emerged from the creation of the Sons of Light, otherwise known as the Essene. These were early Gnostics, Christians who wrote the New Testament in Qumran. The Christian play, that of Jesus, was a set-up by the Essene, which means the Shining Ones, and who stretched back into Egypt, and from Egypt to ideas were mixed from Sumeria. There can be no revealing of them today, as their beliefs have dissipated into the Mother Church of Catholicism. If any organisation on the globe is still the Shining Ones, then we do not need to look at secret societies, bankers or businessmen. We do not need to turn to the disbanded historical Illuminati and Men in Black. We do not have to go to a few innocent Freemasons who have no idea what it is they are really worshipping. The true Shining Ones are out in the open, and they are still proselytising like never before. They are still forming new branches, still grafting onto the vine. They paradoxically hide behind others, and yet fear no man. They are the most powerful, non-governmental organisation on the globe and have been for centuries. They have wealth that even the United States would envy, and yet declare poverty. They have a presence in every single country in the world like no other. They have their hands in just about every cloak and dagger society we could mention, and instigated most of them. They feverishly cling to secrecy and declare openness. They control the minds of billions and influence the rest. They make policy that governments have to adhere to. They are the Catholic Church. The story of the Illuminati, or Shining Ones, and the ancient belief systems they employed is complex. There is good reason for the complexity involved, however. The small-time beginnings of the Shining Ones in the tribal unit, where the medicine men gained control through subtle psychological manipulation and his mysterious skills, gathered over vast periods of time, are humble in origin. The understanding of a deeper truth and of ways seemingly foreign to us are now given various names by the scientific community. His apparent control of cycles and navigation gave the shaman his air of authority and mystery. Using his understanding of the patterns and cycles of the solar and stellar universe and their relationship to mankind gave him an edge, a unique selling point and perspective on man that was his sole ownership. This knowledge kept him in power for centuries, and it is this understanding of the origin of the Shining One, or Illuminati, that we need to understand in order to evade the obvious trip into Alice's Wonderland, for many have actually seen the similarities that abound and given voice to them as being derived from alien, Atlantean, or even subterranean origin. Yes, these people would seem alien and angelic. Yes, they would seem to have come from a time of sunken islands and ages of mystery. Yes, they may have even come from underground, but only these things if you ignore the law of human nature. This law states that man will follow if he is shown the way, especially if there is a promise of something wonderful at the end of the journey. The holiday trip of a lifetime was offered to mankind by these very ordinary human beings, and they succeeded in gathering a huge following with the promise of salvation through enlightenment. The mystical magician guided man on a path he was crying out to walk. There is no need for aliens, angels or Atlantis in this scenario. Occasionally the products offered by the Shining Ones need repackaging. Sometimes it needed research and a new image was created from this research, opening up new fields of exploitation. The medicine man began and ended with healing. From physical well-being to spiritual dynamics, the process was intertwined like the coiling of the snake. Different words were used for the same practice, and the languages of the separate cultures helped to make the practices seem different. The art of the various civilizations aided the ethnic variance, and as if by magic, there seemed to be a cultural difference. Along the history of the way, these new names and languages opened up or created the opportunities for hiding the amazing knowledge of manipulation in myth, and therefore power remained with the initiated. The picture now, thousands of years and millions of words later, is clouded, so much so that truth itself is difficult and in fact impossible to know. All we do know is that there is more to the story than we have been led to believe. The standard history books tell the story of the surface, of what's happened, but not always why. Sometimes a history is cultivated to grow in a certain way and at certain speeds, creating the story required. The danger is that this itself takes away the reality of the story. It hides even more than the symbolism, the truth. Behind the standard histories of the nations there is a folklore, myth and legend. Very carefully the real truths were hidden in these alternative histories. Those with the eyes to see could observe the reality, the truth. The others were content with what they believed to be the truth. Kings, queens and politicians have been at the forefront of these standard histories, keeping the masses happy with a natural order and democracy of life. We only vote those into power who want power. Should we breed our leaders to be what we want them to be? Democracy in that respect is a false democracy. Of course, through history we have bred our leaders, we called them kings, but even this fell into or was created by the ones who wanted power. Nothing seems to be more corrupt than man. Behind the scenes of our history, a massive and relatively untold story is hidden. Who now, after 2,000 years, will believe that Jesus lived after his crucifixion and travelled abroad, who will see him as just another solar deity. Time is one of the greatest convincers. The essence of the truth has been hidden from us. The story we are force-fed from birth has seeped into our minds, and over time we have literally come to accept it as fact. Faith and time build a strong wall of belief, which becomes so great nothing will break it down, except maybe a constant barrage over time. The belief created was taken on by the faithful, who wrote down in the histories which we now believe, and without knowledge perpetuated the lie which they were part of. Nobody was or is impartial. All books, all writings are based upon a bias of some kind. That is one of the first rules any historian or investigator must understand. When looking back at what was written, understand that somebody wanted to make a point of some kind, and it was always their point, not the opposition's. Bias toward a religion, a leader, a war, and even a product. St. Nicholas, the great figure of Christmas for so many, was not originally dressed in red. He began his career as white, with a white beard. Who now would see a fat man with a white beard and a white suit and say it was Santa Claus? Many years ago, Coca-Cola took the white image and made history with it, creating the now familiar red-garbed, jolly-looking Father Christmas. They altered our perception of what his age-old saint was. This was just a clever marketing campaign. So too is religion. It may take another few thousand years for mankind to see things differently, to understand that what we have been lied to, unless a better marketing campaign emerges from within the inner sanctum of the Shining Ones. 100 years ago, the idea of an ancient priesthood was hinted at by Edward Carpenter in his book Pagan and Christian Creeds. He wrote, referring back to the existence of something resembling a great world religion, which has come down through the centuries, continually expanding and branching in the process. The idea was there, the notion that there simply must have been more to all this evidence. Even now we grasp at other reasons for the shocking data. Take Eric von Daniken, who says the only way to explain these correspondences is to assume that there must, at the dawn of time, have been a single original teaching, otherwise it would have been mentioned in historical records. The general consensus ever since has been the now familiar independent eruption theory, that all over the globe these beliefs were somehow evolving quite separately. 100 years ago, this idea was accepted quite easily. Time has served us well in this way and aided our perspective. We no longer need to assimilate religious ideas or tread carefully around touchy Victorian religious intolerance. Since the ideas of independent eruption or evolution in the realms of belief, we have discovered that world travel was definitely possible. Actual archaeological discoveries are happening constantly, showing that earlier and earlier civilizations did indeed travel long distances in quite sophisticated ways. Evidence of early travel is glossed over or forgotten, deemed to be irrelevant and dangerous. Writers were almost afraid to appear too factual about myths and treated them instead like some great classical literature, which was where as an art form, not history. Nobody wanted to be shot down by science. Unfortunately, attitudes like this can stop the equally creative urges required for good investigative historical research. Now, however, we can read old myths with the understanding that they do hold truth, just not how we originally perceived. The truth is hidden and needs reading from a different angle. Symbolism speaks of a deeper truth. An exciting new way can now be opened up. New interpretations of old and discarded historical material will gradually throw light into a darkened world of certainty. But they now also have technology on their side. Control of the internet, mobile phones, apps and more is under the control of the same capitalist elite and monitored by governments full to brim of the old boys. They see and hear everything. They are building up huge amounts of data on their subjects, and they use it to control us. It has been proven that those in power have manipulated us on massive scales for recent elections and national referendums. This power is not going away. It will in fact build and become even more powerful as they utilise artificial intelligence for the purposes of a free, peaceful and united world. Their ultimate goal is on site, a one-world government. It will just appear in a different form than we previously envisaged. But will they take kindly to being exposed, or will they simply watch the boat float on the river of time and remain unexposed and mocking? If they do still exist, then we take our hats off to them and their marvellous ingenuity over the many centuries. We are but individuals, they are many, and have time and vast knowledge on their side.